So I'll try and stick around here. So PwC has been working with a lot of retailers globally and in India, especially around in their data and analytics journey. And every year we do a survey, which is really focused on what are the evolving trends in the retailing, and specifically around how different companies are using analytics for their growth. This survey was conducted across 25 countries. So this survey is conducted around, is it better? Is it okay? Can you hear me at the back? Yeah, all right. So this survey was conducted at the beginning of this year around 25 countries with more than 20,000 people, including India. And it's a very comprehensive survey, which has 11 categories, not just grocery. It had health, it had fashion and beauty, books, music, and so on and so forth. We've just released a survey in India, and what we wanted to do was release this at this particular forum. What I wanted to do before releasing it is walk you through a very quick sort of takeaways, 5 takeaways from an analytics perspective. And I believe that it's going to be quite useful for you. And of course, you can collect the copies at the PwC kiosk, which is at the front end. So the first focus that we are seeing right now is really around the data, right? So a lot of data which is already present. There is a big mention about big data and what it can do. But what people are not realizing, or people are realizing but not able to sort of get it right, is how do we make existing data useful? So we were just talking in the morning with my fellow panelists, and Siju mentioned about the black data, which is already, or a dark data, which is already there in the retailers' systems, which is not being leveraged. And it could be a log file, it could be a customer call data, it could be website server data, and so on and so forth. So one of the big focus that we are seeing is more and more companies are spending a lot more time, a lot more energy in terms of what we call is a connected data. And connected data is nothing but your ability to create a single customer view across your different functions, across your different systems. And a lot of the effort is being done there. And if you look specifically around India, so India is largely between level 2, and some of them have sort of started to make progress in level 3, which is an attribute data. But the real nirvana is around the level 4, which is the connected data. So connected data, as I said, is not just about the internal data, but also about the external data. And that's where the big data platforms are coming into play. So how do I use, for example, census data, or for example, weather data to figure out the impact on my demand, right? So can a pizza guy, for example, figure out any correlation between the weather and the power outages in the city to see how much demand is getting generated? So that's the kind of connected data that we are talking about. We've already talked about a lot in terms of how FMCG companies and retailers can combine in terms of new product introductions, in terms of their merchandising decisions. But why not consumer finance companies who are sort of providing credit facilities through these retailers? What is the kind of information that we can get about our customers once we start looking at their financial information as well? The second piece is really around the insight generation methods, right? So 2 years back when we did this survey, almost 60% of the people were on the left-hand side of this particular chart, largely focused on getting their data strategies right, data infrastructure right, and doing a little bit of insight generation through what we call is reporting and descriptive analytics, right? So what is happening? Why is it happening? Where is it happening? Those are the kind of questions that we are answering. But this year, what we've seen is almost 68% of the people, including in India, are starting to cover the entire spectrum, which is leveraging advanced analytics as well as data sciences capabilities to draw much better and bigger insights, not only for your current requirements, but also about predicting the future. More importantly, what was also seen is how do they operationalize it, right? So how do they empower their frontline people? So we just heard about the supply chain challenges. So how do we empower the supply chain executive with insights which will help them in terms of deciding what product to supply at what store, at what point in time, and in what quantity? And given the complexities of 15,000 SKUs, 5,000 stores, imagine the kind of combination that you're talking about. So that's where the whole issue around predictive analytics is coming in. The last bit, which is not so much happened in India, but it's happening in a lot of emerging markets, and it's definitely happened in the Western world, is around embedding analytics. And when I say embedding, it's not just about the technology as well, but it's also the skilling and the orientation. So you got a chief merchandise officer in your organization. How do we empower him or embed the decision-making process or analytics-driven decision-making process on a day-to-day basis? How does he decide which particular SKUs need to go to a promotion at what point in time? And that should that promotion will be a BOG off or a percentage off and so on and so forth. So you're seeing a lot of trends around embedding analytics almost on every functional basis, including the HR, by the way. The third area is, and I think these questions keep coming back to us, and especially around the big data, as to how do I generate value out of this big data? And our view is that A, there is enough data that you already have, plus you're talking about the big data. And the simple way of sort of looking at areas where you can generate value is look at the shareholder value creation map. So fundamentally, it's got three elements to it. Either you're basically trying to improve the revenue, or you're trying to increase your margins, or you're getting the better asset productivity. And if you break them down, broadly speaking, there are four big areas for analytics in the retail industry. The first one is really around the merchandising, which is knowing your category DNA, right? So which category is driven by what kind of behavior? Is it driven by promotions? Is it driven by a certain segments that I need to make sure, because they not only buy this category, but they also buy other categories as well. Is it driven by range? So this is the category that I need to get my range right? There are certain categories where I need to go wider rather than deeper from an SKU perspective. So that's where the entire merchandising analytics comes in. What is the kind of space that I need to give to this particular place? And the second one is, of course, and there's a lot more discussion which has happened around marketing analytics or a customer sort of analytics, again focusing on and revenue growth. How do we create personalized experiences at scale for our consumers, and especially in the omni-channel world? And remember, these are the guys who are living in digital world, and they have the ability to sort of change their purchasing patterns very quickly. So that's what the marketing analytics focuses on, and how do you put those people in the center of the decision making? So which product should I be on price leader, for example? Which are the categories where, or the products where I can be not a price leader, but I need to get my assortment right? Same thing with promotions. How do I get so anybody can sell promotions at the 60% off, 70% off, 80% off. How many of us can truly raise their hand and say, can I do a promotion profitably at a 20% off discount? And that's what promotion analytics allows you to do that. The bottom two areas are really focusing on either asset productivity or increasing your margin. So supply chain was just talked about. I'm not going to spend too much time. But remember, whether it's robotics, whether it's platform, the intelligence comes from analytics and data. So your ability to capture data, build intelligence on top of it, and create the ability to enable people to consume that analytics insights so that they can take smarter decisions at speed and at scale. Of course, store operations, that's where a lot of sensor information is talking about. There is a huge challenge in India around shrinkage, the stolen goods, and so on and so forth. How can analytics can drive that? Which particular stores are more vulnerable for that kind of behavior versus which stores which are not so much vulnerable? And of course, the entire information excellence, which is supporting or underpinning the entire four areas. So when we spoke to people in terms of what are the next generation capabilities that they're looking from their analytics infrastructure, right? So this is where the platforms and the technology comes into. So they talked about 6 things. The first thing is the self-service. So this is really about embedding analytics, right? Nowadays, you want a merchandising manager to have the ability to start playing with the information that he has or the insight that he has. Is there a way that he can start analyzing which promotion has worked for me and not go through a centralized team or an IT team? And that's what self-service capability is about. And that's how you start empowering people to taking those decisions and adopting new capabilities. Of course, the second one is real-time in memory. A lot of has been spoken about it. It's about speed, right? Speed and scale. So how soon can I get a streaming data into my systems and start making sense out of it so that my online sort of strategies or mobile strategies can start playing out very quickly? Third, of course, the advanced analytics. This goes back to the spectrum that I was talking about. We got a lot of value by focusing on descriptive analytics, but there is far greater value which is being lying on predictive analytics. What kind of, for example, weather trend can we use to figure out our demand or supply constraints? So there are enough examples in the market. For example, in Walmart in US, sort of looks at weather data and figure out what kind of demand impact is going to happen on individual categories and individual SKUs. Very simple examples there. Of course, the big data, and there is a panel, so I'm not going to spend much time there, and the hybrid architectures. So one of the big challenges that people are talking in terms of big data is, how big should my platform be? And the answer that we try and give is, it depends on where you want to go, but it also depends, it also is about that you don't have to get it right all in the first time. You can almost pretty much go into pay as you go as a service. There are enough players in the market which will work with you to make sure that you're not overspending or underspending on your architectures. And then, of course, the cloud platform, which is very much close to the hybrid architectures. And the last bit, which is extremely critical for your adoptions, analytic adoptions and embedding in your organization, is advanced visualization. And that is today, if you look at most of the descriptive reports that we generated, or most of the insight that we generated, they were generated from inside out perspective. Data says something and you threw that out. But today, what people are looking for is that insight needs to tell a story. What happens if my customer does A, B, C, D to the demand of my particular store, to the pricing of my particular SKUs, or the promotion that I want to do? So it needs to tie that up. That visualization is all about telling a story for your business guys to get comfortable and start trusting and believing in that data and taking decisions. So those are the 3 or 6 pieces. Underlying each one of them is basically the skills, and this is very often the very understated piece of it. And this is one of the big barriers in adoption of new technologies or new platforms. So you got the data management skills on the left-hand side, the advanced analytics and data science, and of course, the business decision management and enablement, as we call it. Because imagine a guy who's been taking a decision for 10 years based on certain experiences that he has had, right? Or by speaking to people. Now you're asking him to take a decision based on certain insights, certain data, which is quite different. How do you make him feel comfortable? And that's where the business enablement happens. So the last one is really building capabilities. So how are these organizations building capabilities? So according to our survey, they've fundamentally looked at 4 sort of routes to building these capabilities. One is completely organic in-house. So they start building one by one. Sometimes they've acquired a company and so on and so forth. That's the second part. The third one is they have basically chosen a partner to completely outsource that piece. And the fourth one is the hybrid model. And if you look at each of these options on a 4-dimensional basis, from a time to value, from a cost perspective, from a control perspective, and access to best practices, the hybrid model is something which is getting preferred. Almost everybody who's sort of building this capability, they have identified hybrid approach to sort of building those capabilities. So those were the 5 key trends that I sort of came out. As I said, the report is out there. I'm very happy to sort of share it with you. Feel free to sort of reach out, and it's a great resource for you. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Any questions if anybody has?